Valerie and Her Week of Wonders is a Czech New Wave film that came out in 1970 that's written and directed by Jaromil Jides. So Valerie and Her Week of Wonders is a film that I blind bought in a Criterion Hall at least a year and a half ago, and gladly I'm finally now getting to it because I blind wrecked it in my Discord server for like the billionth time, and I guess finally everybody in the Discord server just felt sorry for me and voted for it. So that's what finally gave me the push I needed to watch Valerie and Her Week of Wonders. Why do I need a push to watch a film that I'm really interested in? I have no idea. I just have a really bad habit of blind buying Criterion films that I really want to see and then just never watching them. I have at least 10 to 15 blind buys in my Criterion collection that I just haven't watched yet. But one of my New Year's resolutions is to at least watch half of the blind buys that I already own before Criterion season rolls around again. Valerie and Her Week of Wonders is obviously a film I was really excited to check out. As I mentioned, I blind directed over 1 billion different times, mostly because of the fact that it's a Czech New Wave film, and the few Czech New Wave films that I have seen, I've absolutely adored. The Cremator, I think, was the first film in the Czech New Wave movement that I checked out, no pun intended, and I think that film is an absolute masterpiece. I reviewed that film like 2 or 3 years ago. If you want to check that review out, please do. I'm probably cringe, but do it anyway. Daisies is a film that I also watched about a year ago, blind bought the Criterion and actually reviewed it. So again, you want to check that out, that would be awesome. And obviously, I had an absolute blast with that film. That is honestly probably one of the most energetic and fun art house films that I've ever seen. And also just a fun little fact for everybody, the woman that wrote the screenplay for Daisies, Esther Krumbakova, also co-wrote the screenplay for Valerie and Her Week of Wonders. Now, Valerie isn't actually an original screenplay. It's actually adapted from a novel that came out in 1945, but still, you gotta give her a bunch of credit because I'm sure that the film experience of this is a lot different than what the novel experience of this film is. I mean, it could be wrong. As I mentioned, I never read the novel, but it just seems like the presentation of this film is way too unique and bizarre for me to suggest that it's anything like reading the novel. Because this film is bonkers in so many different ways. Obviously, I really enjoyed this film quite a bit. And I actually watched this film twice before coming on camera and talking about it. One, because it's actually a pretty short film. It's only 1 hour and 17 minutes. So in terms of runtime, I feel like this film didn't really demand that much of me to just go back and give it another watch. And two, I wanted to watch it again because I feel like there's just so much going on and there's just so much to unpack and discuss. And I feel like watching it the first time, you're just kind of concerned about where everything's going to play out. And also I felt a little bit confused on whose character was what and how each character was related to another character and how just confused on how the narrative was progressing and how characters ended up where they were. So I feel like on second watch, it's just a lot easier to relax and just knowing already where the film unfolds and where and just what the film is and what it's going to do. It's just a lot easier to relax and take in the film for what it is. Now let me just say, even though I really enjoyed this film quite a bit, it's certainly not a film that's going to be for everybody. And I don't really blame anybody who watches this film and doesn't really like it. Honestly, I don't even blame you if you watch this film and outright hate it. I mean, I kind of hope that there's some part of you that can have some sort of artistic appreciation for what this film is doing. But at the end of the day, this film is just so experimental. It's so out there and so unforgiving in terms of everything, really, in terms of structure, in terms of presentation, in terms of editing, in terms of narrative, in terms of content. I mean, this film also has controversial content, which I'll get to in a little bit, but just in every way, it's just really uncompromising and isn't really all that concerned with telling a cohesive narrative that everybody can just follow along. And, you know, in one way, it kind of reminds me of The Color of Pomegranate, which is a film that I absolutely loved, but pretty much everybody in my Discord server outright disliked. And it's hard to really blame them because it's just one of those films that is mostly concerned with expressing theme through imagery and situations than it is really telling a compelling narrative. Like, in a way, and I don't really mean to say this as a way to dog on the film because, again, I still really enjoyed this film quite a bit. But in a way, I feel like this film reflects the goofy idea that a lot of outsiders have in their head of what an art film is. Like, I feel like this is the reason why a lot of outsiders don't really give art films a chance. Because to them, they see a film like this and they just write it off as pretentious nonsense. And again, it's kind of hard to blame them for that, even though, again, I don't see it that way at all. But if I'm trying to get somebody into art house cinema, this isn't necessarily the place I would start. But anyway, let's just go ahead and start talking about the film itself. So, right out of the gate, this film kind of prepares you exactly for what kind of film it's going to be. There's a lot of jarring editing choices that, honestly, for me, do a great job at expressing the surrealist and fantasy and gothic-like atmosphere and vibe that you get throughout the entire film. And both thematically and narratively, within the first 10 minutes, it basically establishes the storyline of what this film is, which is basically following a teenage character, Valerie, who experiences her first menstrual cycle. And once she experiences this, the world around her begins to change in a sinister way that she hasn't experienced before. And to me, that's mostly because in most cultures, especially back then, but even today, I feel like in most cultures, when a young lady experiences her period for the first time, that's when, again, culturally speaking, she is viewed as like the spark of becoming a woman. This is when everyone around her now views her in this different, mature way. And they are now forced to live in a reality in this more defensive way from obviously a more patriarchal society and culture that essentially preys upon women in this incredibly perverse way. And I love that this film crafts a wicked world filled with witches and vampires and such, because, again, just to act on preying on young women in this way comes off incredibly vampiric. And I just loved the way that this film was drawing those correlations symbolically. And I also really love the fact that that religion is a huge thematic element of this film as well, where you have priests and bishops, again, acting in this incredibly perverse way. And also, again, drawing this correlation between priests and vampires in a way where they're both kind of obsessed with purity. But again, only women's purity, because really, they could give a shit less how many girls a young man has slept with. It's really about keeping the women as pure and as sacred as possible so that, I don't know, hopefully they can be the first ones to split the pomegranate, as this film so beautifully puts it. But yeah, the vampiric imagery in this film is probably some of the most unsettling vampiric imagery I've seen in any film tackling vampires. Especially with the way it just jumps out at you. Like, the very first scene we get of this vampire image is just so, like, bam, in your face, comes out of nowhere, and it's just this demonic image that, again, catches you off guard and is genuinely unsettling. And then even in the next one, like, through editing and just through the presentation of the imagery that we're seeing, like the way that the vampire like uncovers his face and the way it just kind of goes back and forth between human form and vampire is just, it's really, again, like off-putting. And I think the makeup is done quite well. And again, the presentation goes a long way into how it's like revealing the imagery that does a really great job and provokes a reaction out of me. And even older women can start perceiving and looking at teenagers in a more competitive way once they start embarking in womanhood. And in this film in particular, Valerie has a grandmother, and you could tell, like, as the film progresses, her grandmother starts to crave what Valerie has and will pretty much do anything to just throw her under the bus in order to gain her youth back and start again gaining the attention of men around her. And also this film has biblical imagery all over the place. There's a lot of different callbacks to imageries of Adam and Eve, even symbolically speaking, the Fountain of Youth. So yeah, I feel like religion does have a huge place in this film. I think it's mostly because, traditionally speaking, in Christianity and really all the Abrahamic religions, when you think about it, women don't really have a very modest and valuable place under, again, traditional teachings of religion. Like in this film, you have the practice of marriage. We can debate all day whether or not this was intentional or not, but one of the consequences of marriage for women was that it completely restricts them of their freedom in so many different ways. Any goals or dreams that they wanted to have in their life is simplified to just marrying a man. And I understand that not everybody's going to perceive marriage that way, and I understand that marriage has changed a whole lot through the hundreds of years that it's been around. So, perhaps today in first world countries it's not that dramatic anymore. But still, the point is, religiously speaking, men always had a higher and more valuable place than women. But I guess we should go ahead and just start discussing the most controversial element of this film, which is the fact that not only does this film follow a teenage girl that is 13 years old, but the actual person that plays the character was actually 13 years old at the time when this was filmed. And again, if that's something that turns you off and makes it to where you just cannot appreciate this film in any way, I do understand that. But from my perspective, and this is what I usually do my best to do when watching films, especially older films that take place in a completely different culture, obviously this film was made in the early 1970s, 1970 to be exact, and takes place in a completely different culture that I know nothing about. So, I try to watch this film for what it is. At the time and place where this film was produced, it wasn't really viewed as that crazy of a thing to do. And people say, well, it still had no reason to exploit her and sexualize her in the way that this film does. I kind of just disagree in the sense that this film was sexualizing her. Because ultimately, I never felt like this film was capturing her in a way that wanted the audience to feel turned on by her in any way. I actually feel like most of the time it's actually on the contrary, and it's basically criticizing the world around her that is sexualizing her at such a young age. So again, not saying that it was morally okay for the filmmakers to make this decision and do that, but at the same time, I think basically 50 years later in America, it's really easy for me in hindsight to look back at that and be like, oh, completely disgusting movie. And also, I know this probably won't help at all, but I am just throwing this out there just as a fact. Apparently the young girl's mother was there supervising her the entire time on set. So I can only hope that the mother did her job and made sure that she was being handled in the most professional way possible. Again, I'm not saying it makes it right. Just throwing that information out there to do whatever y'all want to do with it. And in terms of criticisms, again, even though I really enjoyed this movie for all of its creativity and all of its inspiration and, all of its thematic attempts and through all the aesthetics and the cinematography that, by the way, is stunning basically throughout the entire film. Just a really creative use of the camera. Love the score as well. I think the score was utilized incredibly well, especially in the third act of this film, which is really bonkers and out there. And I don't even really know what the ending still even means. But by the ending, I mean basically the final 15 minutes of this movie. I still don't really know what the fuck I watched fully. I mean, I have my ideas, but it's very, I don't know, I feel like it's still kind of simplistic and I'm still trying to understand. I guess, a quick, simple view of my interpretation, quick spoiler, I guess, stuff, is that she either died and then basically is experiencing her idea of heaven or paradise in a way, or she was actually able to wish all the evil away at the very end. And she was able to experience life as if her getting her menstrual cycle didn't have any effect on the world around her. So, yeah, unspoiler, that's about it. That's all I wanted to say. But there's just a lot going on in that final 15 minutes. I'd love to hear what everybody else thinks about that element of the film in the comment section. But anyway, getting back to my actual criticism of the movie, I do feel like it would have benefited from having a more, like, having a little bit of a stronger foundation thematically and even narratively. Because even though I said it's about all these different things, I feel like it's always just throwing stuff out there without having something, again, foundational to really pull from. Like, for example, when I watch a film like Eraserhead, which is one of my favorite horror films of all time. To me, that's a 10 out of 10 masterpiece. My favorite David Lynch film. That film does an excellent job at laying out a foundation about the anxieties and nightmarish reality of parenthood in a way to where I can have so much fun with all the imagery that it's throwing at me, to where I'm not feeling all that frustrated and I'm just able to appreciate everything that's happening on screen. With Valerie, it's not exactly that way, even though I do appreciate it, and I think it's incredibly imaginative and creative. It does feel a little scatterbrained in a way that comes off a bit thematically messy. And again, I feel like if it laid a stronger foundation, I would have appreciated this film more than I already did. But anyway, I feel like I've talked enough about this film. I'm really glad I own it, and it is a film that I can see myself watching quite often because, again, it is quite a short film, and it's just full of so much insanity that it's something I could definitely see myself coming back and watching and not feeling like it's really all that demanding. So I'm going to give Valerie and Her Week of Wonders a strong 7 out of 10. Well, that's all I got to say about Valerie and Her Week of Wonders. Please consider joining my Patreon so you can join my Discord server. $5 a month, you can get access to the Discord, and it is an absolute blast. It is any film lover's fantasy. You get to speak to film lovers all across the world. You'll get to experience movie nights and film discussions with me and other film lovers. I mean, I've had people join the Discord for basically over 3 to 4 years now, and they are still not budging, and they absolutely love what's going on. So I would absolutely love having more people coming on board to this Kino train, and also at the same time supporting my channel. Yeah, anyways, if you really enjoyed what I had to say about Valerie and Her Week of Wonders, make sure to give this video a like and share it amongst your friends. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel to be updated on more film-related content.